Thanks for joining the Hypersensitivity Reaction of Allergies. My name's Heather Schofield, and I'm the Education Director and one of the advisors here at Biomed. I'm really excited to be able to talk about this topic because we're not going to be talking just about allergies and allergy symptoms and how to just deal with the symptoms, but rather going into the deeper aspects of how to heal the body on a very deep level, on the milieu level, so that the body is less reactive overall and our end result with our patients don't have as many allergy-type symptoms. Okay, so then how do we go through all of this? Let's get started to do that. All right, so, and in this picture here, these are pictures of mast cells, and all those little purple spots within are the granules which degranulate. So we'll be talking about that, and that degranulation contains histamine in it, and so that does create the allergic response within the body. So these mast cells, we're going to be talking quite a bit about these guys tonight. Okay, so let's just start off with the very basics. What are allergies? Allergies, they are an overreaction of the immune system to harmless substances, with some of the focus tonight talking about the hypersensitive reactions or hyperreactions of allergies and allergic responses. And we're only going to be focusing in on one portion because that's typically what we're seeing in practice and in clinic. And so this definition of allergies falls into that type 1 reaction, which we'll be talking about in detail in just a few minutes. And so coming back to what are allergies? Allergies, they're an overreaction of the immune system to a harmless substance, and typically blocking histamine and avoiding the substances are very common practice. However, that doesn't really get to the root cause. And so this, of course, makes lots of sense, and we're really fundamentally going to be talking about how to get to that root cause tonight. When we're talking from the biological medicine perspective, allergies are not just this reaction to an allergen, but rather a symptom of a deeper problem. And that deeper problem is what is called a severely compromised internal milieu. The internal milieu contains a lot of different things. And in some ways, people talk about the milieu as connective tissue, the spaces in between the spaces in between the organs, the spaces in between the cells, in the matrix. So there's lots of different words that are used to describe this internal milieu. And fundamentally, if you're thinking about the connective tissue or this matrix, when it is congested, when it has excess acid, so it's acidic, and then when there is where the body's not able to detox properly, when things for self-regulation are compromised or burdened, then the cells are not able to detox properly, the organs are not able to detox properly, and the system is just generally not able to function really well. You don't get the neurotransmitters and different signals that are passing through to signal the body for what things it needs to do, and then things just get really congested and self-regulation slows down or stops. And so when we want to get into this compromised internal milieu, it's really kind of cleaning up the body on a very deep level, and so that the body can self-regulate and be able to do the processes it needs to do. And when we're talking about this specifically with allergies, it's allowing the body to actually be less reactive overall. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 types of allergic reactions. Fundamentally, we're only going to be focusing on type 1 mostly tonight, but it's good to just kind of understand that there are these 4 types of allergic reactions. So the type 1 reaction, it's an IgE-mediated hypersensitivity, and I'll go into a bit more detail about what that means in just a moment. And so basically, a person is exposed to an allergen, and then that ends up creating this IgE mediator that attaches to a mast cell, and then when there's an exposure again, a second or exposures after that, then these mast cells degranulate or dump histamine into the system, and then you have an allergic response. And so you can see it being symptoms like hay fever, asthma, hives, food allergies, eczemas, allergic-like responses. And it also then can be life-threatening, like anaphylaxis. So that's the 2 categories that you see in the type 1-like reaction. And so the next type 2 reaction. It's a IgG-mediated cytotoxin hypersensitivity. And so there is an exposure, and the body, antibodies react directly with the antigen, and it induces cell lysis, so basically breaking up or eating of the cell. And so this then is what is generally seen in autoimmune-like reactions. And this goes into very deep things. So typical manifestation, blood transfusion reactions, and autoimmune hemolytic anemia, and many other types of autoimmune diseases. So this is a very serious reaction for sure. The type 3 reaction, this immune complex mediated hypersensitivity, this is where you get these complexes that are formed, and they end up being deposited into the tissues, creating an inflammatory response, and you tend to see localized and or generalized reactions. Again, things in a lot of cases we wouldn't necessarily see specifically in practice. However, definitely things like rheumatoid arthritis and systemic lupus are part of this reaction. And so, again, these are very complex things, so we're not going to talk about these so much as far as allergies tonight. And then the last reaction are the type 4, the cell-mediated hypersensitivity. This is, again, an exposure to something, and it can include things like perfume, nickel, latex, poison ivy, topical drugs that are put on, and then there is this reaction that happens. It also is classified as a delayed reaction, and contact dermatitis, tubercular lesions, graft rejection, or organ transplant, these are all areas that come under here. However, it is the delayed reaction that is also of interest to us, including food reactions like celiac disease. Okay, so with those 4 type reactions, let's make it relevant to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So the type 1 allergic reaction, which happens to be allergies, when we're talking about seasonal allergies and food allergies and allergies to pet hair, this is in this realm. And so you've got this allergen, let's say it's cat hair, and then it's exposed to these mast cells. The B cells then end up creating this IgE. The IgE attaches to the mast cell or the basophil, and then when there's a re-exposure or repeat exposure to that cat hair, it then has this IgE cell-mediated reaction, and the cell degranulates, and you have histamine and leukotrienes and other things like serotonin and bradykinin and lipid mediators, all kinds of stuff end up getting dumped into the system, and then this creates this allergic-like response, and in some cases, very serious anaphylactic type responses. And so some of the types of reactions then, just to put it into a more way we can understand it, it includes things like things that are injected, medications or bee stings, that are ingested, medications, things like nuts and shellfish, contact with the skin, poisonous plants, animal dander, pollen, and latex, and then finally inhaled allergens, including things like pollen, pet dander, dust, and mold and mildew. And so when you end up having, of course, a systemic anaphylaxis reaction, this is also very, very serious. This is when somebody needs to be rushed to the hospital and 911, and hopefully they've got an EpiPen on hand, and hopefully they also know that they have a very serious reaction to what's going on. Of course, for those of us that have children or work with children, we understand about peanut allergies being a very serious allergy. And so peanuts, venoms, some serums, some drugs, and generally the root absorption is direct or very quick absorption, and then the body responds in edemas, vascular permeability, tracheal occlusion, and circular collapse and death. So, as I said, very serious. Now, and tonight we will not be talking about protocols within this arena, because I mentioned before this is a very serious condition, a very serious reaction, and 911 and emergency services definitely need to be dealt with in that scenario. when we talk about from the biological medicine perspective, we can definitely be working with patients with anaphylaxis, but not to ever create an expectation where you can turn things completely around and then say that they can have exposure to the things that they're highly allergic to. So that's not what we're going to be talking about at all tonight. I just wanted to put it out there that even kind of in the best biological medicine protocols, we always need to be super careful with what we're doing when it's a very serious condition. Okay, with that said and aside, other types of reactions. So this wheal and flare on the skin, that could be due to insect bites or allergic testing, and you will see it with increased blood flow and vascular permeability in the area. Allergic rhinitis, so allergies that hit the nasal cavities and also the sinuses, like hay fever. And this does include things like pollens, which are inhaled in, or dust mite feces. And then you end up getting irritation of the nasal mucosa, runny nose, edema, congestion, stuffiness, in some cases nosebleeds, some cases headaches. Another inhaled allergen, the pollens or the dust mite feces, can also cause a reaction, and so bronchial asthma results, and you get constriction, increased mucus production, and also the airways get inflamed. And then finally, food allergies, so orally taken in, and we all know about lots of different allergens like shellfish, milk, eggs, fish, wheat. Strawberries are another good example of what people typically have reactions to. And then you can see things like vomiting, diarrhea, itching, hives, anaphylaxis in some situations, and also this is a category where some of that cell or that delayed response can also happen. So we may not see it in that moment and may see that the reaction is happening the next day or 24 to 48 hours. So typical type symptoms, we talked about them, so just a quick visual. And these are, when we're talking about allergies, especially seasonal allergies, are things that often are coming as symptoms into our clinics. And so the sinuses are inflamed and swollen, there's stuffiness, eyes are itchy, eyes are inflamed, eyes are red, stuffy runny nose, itchy sore throat, maybe some constriction with breathing. The eustachian tubes can get blocked and congested and maybe infected, causing also problems with hearing and kind of stuffiness in the ears. And then the sinuses and sinus infections with fluid getting trapped in there can also be a problem. And then I just wanted to give one quick visual of a type 4 allergic reaction. And so this is an image of poison ivy. And then there's an exposure to it. The body has this response, a cell-mediated response. And then the immune response, typically then you see a wheal or fluid-filled sac that is provoked by macrophages and cytokines. And this can be very painful. It can be very itchy. If these break open, these lesions, then it could actually spread the rash even more. If any of you have ever actually experienced poison ivy in any severity, you'll know that it's something that's very unpleasant. I once ended up with poison ivy on my face that spread all over the place. And then after the poison ivy initial response, this allergic response started to calm down, it created a second bacterial infection in the skin on my face due to the staph bacteria that's on there. So it was a very long healing process, and it was during graduation for grade 8, and so all of it was very, very uncomfortable. Okay. But we do have a few solutions topically for things like exposure to allergens that are showing up on the skin. So the environment for type 1 allergic reactions. And so this comes back to us now talking on a bit of a deeper level. So this perfect environment for an allergic and reactive body is a disturbed milieu. I've always said an acidic body is a reactive body, and an allergic body is a reactive body, is an acidic body, and then the acid-base balance or the acidity always comes into this more disturbed milieu. And it's not specifically just about acid-base imbalance when we're talking about the disturbed milieu. It's also talking about the gut and inflammation and leaky gut and detox pathways just not being open and working optimally. So this is where, if you're working with allergies, whether it's somebody who just experiences some springtime allergies or it could be something that it's more throughout the year, and or also food allergies. It all often comes back to this disturbed milieu. Even when we're talking about the type 2, 3, and 4 type reactions, those serious conditions often all come back to a disturbed milieu. And so, as I mentioned, overacidity or acid-base imbalance, often an overburden on the immune system. And so, in addition to looking at what types of foods are creating a strain on the immune system, also building the immune system back up is really important. The mucous membranes of the gut specifically can become altered, and then there's a leaky gut, which then means that you get these excess large protein molecules creating reactions within the body, a disturbed intestinal flora, so back to the probiotics and the microbiota within the gut, and having a really good variety and populations within, toxins, mercury, heavy metals, all creating a burden in the body, and things like mold and candida can also create more of a burden, and this all kind of adds up to this disturbed milieu. And often it's not just one thing, it's a multiple factor component. Okay, so just talking briefly about what these spring allergies that can cause a type 1 reaction are. Just out of interest sake, 25% of Canadians suffer from seasonal allergies. This would be probably the same statistic in the U.S. as well, or very similar. And top spring allergies are pollen from trees, and this is from March to June, including birch, alder, oak, maple, and box elder. Pollen from grasses from May to July, molds and mildews, which could be all year round, dust mites, and pet dander and pet fur, which also can be all year round. And so this disturbed milieu is related to the immune system, and the primary causes of the immune overreaction may go back to childhood. So it's not something that usually happens overnight. It's something that's built up over time. For those of you that have ever studied under Dr. Rao or Dr. Wortman, and when SANM was in its heyday of biological medicine here in Canada and the U.S., one of the components that Dr. Wortman used to talk about is this healthy mucous membrane of the intestinal tract. And so you can see the picture there, or the image on the left, is a healthy mucous membrane of the intestinal tract. The villi and the microvilli are well formed, creating lots of different surface area for absorption in the intestinal tract. And when we're exposed to allergens, then what happens is it starts to destroy these villi and microvilli, and essentially this destruction flattens things right out. And so then you get this atrophic mucous membrane of the intestinal tract due to this exposure to these antigens, which he terms primary antigens. And when we've been exposed to these antigens or these allergens, often through food, it ends up creating this atrophy in the intestinal tract, and then you start to see all kinds of conditions blossom out from this. And so just in general, things like respiratory, skin, GI tract, joint, immune, nervous disorders, and also skeletal disorders all come into play. And while they all have their own set of symptoms and even conditions that go with it, they also can all be traced back to the intestinal tract. All of us have heard, all of us often practice, you need to heal the gut. All symptoms come from the gut, and that is where a lot of the healing and the restoration has to happen. Even Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. So we got to come back here, and so this is also what Dr. Wortman and Dr. Rao were also working on and working from, is heal the gut, and then you can actually have much better ability to help with symptoms and all kinds of other conditions. Now, coming back to allergies, when we heal the gut, we have better ability then to address and or reverse symptoms associated with the respiratory system, and going right back into infancy, and things like bronchitis, asthma, hay fever, allergies, sinusitis, sneezing, attacks, and chronic coughs. As a side note, Dr. Wortman used to say that if you were eating something and then you sneezed within a minute or two of eating that thing, then you're actually allergic to it. So, interesting side fact from our late Dr. Wortman The other thing, as far as these hidden allergies and seasonal allergies, is skin conditions. So again, cradle cap, neurodermatitis, dermatitis, eczema, seborrhea, vitiligo, pertitis, and acne, and also allergic rashes. All can be traced back to needing to do work on the gut because the gut needs some really good rebuilding and restoration. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a little while. So types of therapy options for allergies. Typical options are things like antihistamines, and they could be prescription, over-the-counter, they can be herbal, they could be homeopathic, they could be supplemental, and so there's a whole big category of those. And of course, they're important to help people get through the day and get through dealing with symptoms, but my point always is let's get to the deeper root cause of what's going on. Allergy shots, using a neti pot to flush out the nasal passages, to wash out the allergens and thin out the mucus and just make symptoms better. HEPA filters, indoor AC, avoidance. While sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's also not easy to do that. There's something called provocation neutralization allergy testing, according to Dr. Mercola. It's very effective. And then there's the NATE allergy elimination technique as well. And I'm sure there's many other things, but it's kind of a general list. When we start talking about it from the biological medicine approach, we're not just addressing symptoms, and we're not trying to suppress symptoms. We're not trying to change symptoms. What we're actually doing is we're changing the body's environment, and we're restoring self-regulation of the actual body. This goes back to the terrain and the milieu. It goes back to the gut. It goes back to opening up those detox pathways. And through all of that, and the body better regulating, the body then is going to be less reactive overall, and then less need for those types of symptomatic remedies that people might reach for. So these are the types of things we're going to start now talking about. So diet, restoration and regeneration, acid-base balance, drainage and detoxification, probiotics, gut support and gut repair, and then also some symptomatic relief, because I don't believe we should leave our patients suffering. Okay, so a comprehensive approach. So a comprehensive approach to addressing allergies includes symptomatic relief, and this does include removing and or avoiding triggers, decreasing histamine load and reactivity within the body, and so that is by strengthening the mast cells from degranulation of histamine, and also strengthening the tissues so they're less reactive, and then also generally decreasing the histamine load in the body. Basic milieu restoration. And so that comes back to working with the milieu and the terrain. Acid-base balance is a really big part of that. And then healing the gut is another big part of that as well. And so then healing the gut and restorative diet. So in addition to diet, getting in and healing the mucous membranes, supporting digestive functions, and of course promoting healthy symbiotic microflora are all part of this bigger approach. Okay, so let's talk symptomatic relief and what Biomed has to offer in this arena. So we've got quite a few really awesome symptomatic relief formulas, and they all have a specific category, and so they're actually really easy to use or to determine which to use. If you're looking at just helping to relieve allergic-like symptoms in a natural antihistamine kind of way, we've got something for that. If the patient has more sinus symptoms and sinus congestion, then we have something for that. If they tend to have more of congestion and a runny nose, and upper respiratory type conditions associated with it, then we have something for that. And then right into respiratory with a cough and a lot of mucus buildup in the respiratory lung bronchioles, we've got something for that. Okay, so first, allergy symptom relief, Allernest. This is one of the formulas that comes from Nussman, and it works really, really quickly. It's a homeopathic combination that has ingredients that are all antihistamine, natural antihistamine-like ingredients, and so you get symptomatic relief often within 20 minutes. During really acute situations, you can take 10 drops every 15 minutes, otherwise 10 drops 3 times a day for kind of keeping symptoms at bay. And it Allergens works to decrease the allergic response in allergy symptoms, including things like sneezing, itchiness, redness and itching eyes, runny nose, cough, hay fever, rash, headaches, and congestion. And it can be used for seasonal allergies and environmental allergies, but also food allergies as well. And so if you're looking to have one thing on your shelf for allergies, this is typically the one to have because it's going to take care of most acute-like symptoms for that nice symptomatic relief for your patients while you're working on the deeper causes. If the patient mostly has congestion and sinus-like symptoms, then Hydrastis nasal spray would be the choice. And with the Hydrastis nasal spray, you'd be spraying 1 or 2 sprays up each nostril for a maximum of 5 times per day. Hydrastis nasal spray also works really quickly. Often within minutes, you can start to feel the congestion releasing. And so it's relieving those sinus symptoms, whether it's itchy, sore, congested, stuffy, whatever in kind of that arena, it's going to be helping. And how it works, so Hydrastis is the main ingredient in this formula. It helps to reduce inflammation in the sinus cavities. It also helps to moisturize the mucous membranes in the nasal and the sinus passages so that things don't dry out. Sometimes when they dry out, they can also crack and bleed. And then it also has really nice antimicrobial components to it, so it helps to fight off viral, bacterial, and fungal infections. As a side tip, for people who fly and in airplanes and then tend to get sick or colds or sinus-type symptoms due to the dry air or also potentially breathing in different microorganisms, Hydrastis nasal spray is one of those ones that's great to travel with and to kind of protect and prevent getting sick from air flight. If the patient's predominant symptoms are about congestion and a runny nose, then loofah tabs would be the thing to use. It's a traditional German formula that helps to reduce congestion, especially in kind of upper respiratory symptoms. It reduces inflammation of the mucous membranes. And so it really helps for runny nose, rhinitis. So runny nose is its big component there. And then it also, if there's a postnasal drip that's causing bronchitis, then that would be what to also consider. Headaches if they're due to a lot of congestion. And loofah also helps with swollen lymph nodes and tonsils and kind of tonsil infections. And then finally, if a cough and respiratory congestion is what's coming into play, Bronca would be the thing to consider. It's another traditional German formula that is for lung and bronchial support. And the herbs, so this is an herbal formula. The herbs that are in this formula are some of the best studied cough, lung, bronchial herbs on the planet. It helps to relieve lung and respiratory symptoms. They work like bronchial dilators, so it opens up the airways, and it helps to reduce inflammation, and it helps to reduce coughs as well. And then finally, it helps to kind of loosen up the mucus and get that coughed out. And so Bronca is thought about in cases of all bronchitis, coughs, asthma, infections, and a lot of those kind of lung respiratory conditions, specifically in allergies. The one side note I do want to mention here is this is not an asthma replacement formula. So once again, if somebody is having asthma symptoms, asthma attack, then they need to use the pharmaceutical medication or prescription that they've got. And if it's a serious situation, they should be getting themselves to emergency. However, Bronca, because it's a bronchial dilator, if it's a mild kind of situation, then sometimes it's enough to just kind of open up the airways a little bit. So, okay, those are the symptomatic relief formulas. And so step 2, or kind of approach number 2 within the bigger approach is to decrease the histamine load in the body. And so by decreasing the histamine load, there's 2 things from Biomed that can be really helpful for doing that. And so by decreasing the cellular histamine load in the body, you mean overall you're going to have people less reactive. And so therefore you get some relief with allergy symptoms. And so Allergies is a product that will help to decrease cellular histamine and stabilize the mast cell walls so that they're less likely to degranulate. And then it also blocks histamine from binding to tissues and decreases inflammation. So it is another really ideal symptomatic relief formula and reducing histamine overall, so getting people less reactive. It may not necessarily work as quickly as Allernest, but this is a good seasonal allergy strategy to be using Allergies for the duration of the season to help people be less reactive overall. In some cases, you can actually combine Allergies and Allernest up as a really nice 1-2 allergy symptom relief combo. The other way that you can use another technique is decreasing histamine levels in the cells is using vitamin C. Vitamin C and histamine, they have an inverse relationship. So the more vitamin C that's in the body and also within the cells, the less there will be actual histamine. And so vitamin C is a natural antihistamine, and it does help to stabilize histamine levels. It also helps to break down the histamine structures, so they're less likely to cause reactions, and it builds up the immune response. Also, a clinical pearl from our visionary pharmacist, Harlan Lottie, he talks about vitamin C and how by using it can help reduce dependency on steroid puffers. Okay, so that is decreasing the histamine load. And then we're going to start moving into this milieu restoration and healing the gut. So the restorative part is you restore gut flora, you restore the mucous membranes of the lining of the GI tract, often through diet, you boost the immune system through the Peyer's patches, and then think about things like probiotics, fermented foods, diet with lots of foods to support healthy flora and fauna, omega and EFA oils, supplements, and such. Regeneration, so you remove all food allergens and you get the cells regenerating. And then finally, regulation. So this is where you're getting the body back into self-regulation, detoxification, deacidification, enhancing cellular metabolism, and using things like alkalizers, digestive enzymes, detox remedies, and alkalizing components for the diet to help do all of these things. Okay, so basic milieu. Acid-base balance is a really big part of that, and so you want to reduce inflammation in the body, and acid-base balance is one of these perfect ways to do it. It decreases acute inflammation, and in allergic responses, you can actually use this to decrease an acute allergic response as well. And then, of course, in addition, it helps with joint conditions, improves dysbiosis and candidiasis, improves digestion by providing the bicarbonate as raw materials to improve overall hydrochloric acid production, pancreatic enzymes, and bile secretion. And so up to 80% of your patients can really benefit from acid-base balance. It's one thing that we talk about a lot here at Biomed, and then in addition, when we build protocols for practitioners to use with their patients, often there's an alkalizer, an alkalizing component that goes with it, based on a lot of the German biological medicine principles. So the three alkalizers we have here at Biomed include Alcala, Pleo Alcala, basic powder, and basic tabs. So you have a choice between the German formula from Sanum, which is the Pleo Alcala, or one of the Biomed products. The basic tab is in tablet form. Basic powder and Alcala are both powdered forms. And just a few notes on alkalizing. So again, an acidic terrain is prone to inflammation, allergic reactions, and toxic buildup, and potential for laying down the foundation for chronic conditions. I know I've put this point forward many times about an acid body. Acidic body is a reactive or an allergic reactive body and an inflamed body. So one of the simplest ways to actually start addressing this is using an alkalizer. The pH measures how much hydrogen ions are in the tissues, or how much acid's in the tissues. And so the goal is to flush these excess acid or hydrogen ions out of the tissues to get the balance back. An alkalizer will be having sodium bicarbonate and potassium bicarbonate as its key ingredients. And so this bicarbonate becomes the raw materials for the enzymes, the bile, the hydrochloric acid, and also improving digestion and moving out the excess hydrogen ions. If you would like to learn more about this, there are archived webinars on the Biomed website that actually are specifically about the art of alkalizing and going into lots of detail about all of this. And then measuring it, we're going to talk about how to measure the pH specifically for tissue acidosis, and that is using the urine. So how to determine if one needs to use acid-based therapy. You need to do some pH testing. In this case, blood is not an option, and saliva gives different information. It doesn't really give what's going on within the actual tissues necessarily. It's more about the adrenals and stress response and mineral reserves overall. So if you want to look at this tissue acidosis or how much excess acid is in within the tissues, urine is the best option. So testing urinary pH, you want to do that for 3 days to get a baseline. And your first morning urine, if it is between 5 to 6.2, this indicates tissue acidosis and you need to alkalize. For the rest of the day urine, if it's below 6.8, again, tissue acidosis. The normal ranges for first thing in the morning is 6.2 to 6.8, and for the rest of the day, 6.8 to 7.4. So there's some markers that you can use. The cool thing with Pleo Alcala as an alkalizer, it does contain a pack of pH papers within the box. We also have pH papers available as well. So good thing to stock up on. You can start sending it home with all kinds of clients, and then they get pretty excited about measuring pH and reporting back what's going on. And once they're on an alkalizer, they'd stay on for about a month. They'd stop for a couple of days and then measure their pH again. And I know, again, patients and clients get really excited about doing that to see their improvement. So if somebody does have a result for tissue acidosis, then you want to take an alkalizer. It quickly or mechanically shifts that acid out of the body, and it can be done between 1 to 3 months. And I mentioned already Alcala, basic powder, or basic tab are really good options to be able to do that. This always should be followed up with a more alkaline diet and decreasing stress, and also more alkaline water. However, the one thing to note is even with a really alkaline diet, it's not going to make the movement that you want to do quickly the same as you would for using an alkalizer for that short kind of 1 to 3 month period of time. Morning and night are the easiest times to take an alkalizer, and also very appropriate. If you want to try to sync it with the body's rhythms, then 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. are ideal because that supports circadian rhythms and low energy times for the pancreas. You always want to take an alkalizer with warm water. That keeps the pyloric sphincter open, so the alkalizer will bypass the stomach and go straight into the duodenum where it can be absorbed. And also, you need an empty stomach. Again, you don't want the alkalizer to be neutralizing stomach acid, which is super important for digestion. And it's not meant to be sitting in the stomach. You really want that alkalizer to move into the, as I mentioned, the duodenum so it can get absorbed. And so the rules are when you take an alkalizer, use with some warm water and definitely on an empty stomach, so at least 20 minutes before food or 2 hours after. And then finally, as I mentioned, after a month, take a break for a couple of days, measure your first morning urine, and then if determined that the range is still acidic, then you would continue for another month. Typically, if the urine is still acidic, it's not going to be as acidic as it would have been in that first month. Okay, so then let's move on to starting to talk about healing the gut. And so the components, if we're just looking at this gut lumen, is you've got the mucous membranes, and the mucous membranes provide major defense and a protective barrier, and it's where quite a bit of the immunity also resides. One side note is when we're talking about Candida, when Candida is in its healthy physiological form, it's doing its job by helping nutrient absorption and binding on and taking metals out of the body. However, when it becomes upregulated because of a disturbed milieu, the Candida can start getting hidden more in this mucus, and then starting to cause more problems when it's starting to search for sugar. And so serrapeptase is a really great way because it's a mucolytic, breaking down excess mucus to be able to get at the Candida. If you're really interested in learning about this, then stay tuned because May at Biomed is all about Candida and how to fix it. And we've got a webinar coming up on that as well. Okay, so back to here. So you've got your mucous membranes as one of your defense, your major system of defense, the Peyer's patches. And so these are these patches of immune cells that are in the small intestine, and they are also lymphoid tissue and have a lot to do with kind of general immunity and lymphatics within the body. So going back to when there was the slides about the atrophic mucous membranes. The Peyer's patches are all part of that. And so we've got an actual solution for fixing those, a product from Sanum called Pleoribasan, which is Peyer's patch extract, and is a beautiful component of rebuilding the gut. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And then finally, we've got that bacterial lining. So our flora and fauna, it helps offer resistance to growth of bad bacteria and fungus. It decreases, a decrease in intestinal flora is correlated often to chronic illness and allergies. Okay, so just again, a little bit more about the bacterial flora. A lot of this I'm not necessarily going to go through because, this is a topic that we talk about quite a bit. Where to link it in with allergies, however, is a decrease in intestinal flora is correlated to chronic illness and allergies. And it's also linked with a decreased immune system function. So the flora and fauna, in addition to all the wonderful things that it does within our system, has direct links when they are not in proper balance or they're in low numbers to a decreased immune system and also allergies. So this is why probiotics are really important in cases of allergies. And here's a study that is showing that children with allergies, and so they were having eczemas, runny nose, and red, itchy eyes, and asthma symptoms. They had delayed development in the composition of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus in their microflora. And so these types of strains have been shown to help regulate allergic type immune responses within the body. So therefore, probiotics also strengthen gut defense barrier mechanisms and reduce the antigen load overall in the body. So again, some more information, just kind of linking that flora, fauna, and allergies. Okay, so then let's talk about this last component of healing the gut, and we'll do a quick touch base on our restorative diet as well. So healing the gut is coming back to this whole thing where we're talking about a disturbed intestinal milieu. Acid-base imbalance is a big part of that, and detoxing is a big part of that, but restoring the gut is also very, very essential and often the first approach to all of this. So an anti-inflammatory diet, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail in just a moment, is the first thing to be doing. And then we have something called the intestinal kit. And it's an intestinal repair kit, often used in kind of general health, general GI conditions, things like leaky gut, candida, SIBO, dysbiosis, but it also can be used in people with chronic allergies. And so it contains one of the alkalizers, Pleo-Alkala, and then Pleocitro and Pleosanavis are two milieu organic acid formulas to really help do some deep detoxing on the cellular level. It also contains Pleopaf, which is helping to reduce candida loads in the body, Pleoribasan, which I mentioned is the Peyer's patch extract, and then N-acetylglucosamine, which is working to repair the mucous membranes in the gut. So the intestinal kit is a really easy way because it's got all of these together in a kit. And then there's instructions and protocol that's specifically laid out, and that's easy to follow for patients. And so it's a really nice package that's all together. It's a 2-phase program, and it lasts approximately 5 weeks for a patient to be on it. Or individually, of course, you can use Pleoribasan. And because it's doing that deep healing in the gut, it helps to improve allergic symptoms and reduce inflammation and improve leaky gut as well. The one thing I've always said with Pleoribasan is to give it without doing some major diet work and kind of intestinal repair would not be doing this product or your patient justice. So it's really important to make sure you're kind of doing a whole repair program, and then Pleoribasan really shines. N-acetylglucosamine, as I mentioned, it is helping to repair mucous membranes in the gut. And then we also have 2 probiotics, Probiotic 7-in-1. And so this is a human strain multi-probiotic with 7 different strains and is really great for getting many different strains into the system at once. We also have a product called Bacillus coagulans. It was also known before as Lactobacillus sporogenes. This is a spore biotic with the single strain Bacillus anticoagulants, which also has big links to allergies in general. And both probiotics, they're shelf-stable, heat-stable, and acid-stable. So if a patient forgets when they're in the fridge to take their probiotic, this is one that they don't need to forget. They can keep it right with them. And then in addition to that, they're really great products to travel with. Okay, and so then just to come back to talking about why food matters in the diet. So according to both Dr. Rao and Dr. Werman, which are both European biological medicine practitioners and really forefathers in the world of Sanum therapy, they talked about these primary antigens, so these first foods that we're introduced to as infants, cow's milk, eggs, and wheat. And then these can become antigenic in the body and destroy those lovely villi, microvilli, and so then leaky gut kind of comes into place, and this atrophic mucous membranes of the gut. And then this makes the body more susceptible to these secondary antigens, and that includes seasonal allergens, pollens, dust, pet fur, other types of foods that aren't classified as primary antigens, and can lead to all types of those reactions we talked about at the very beginning, those hypersensitive reactions. Once you've got the gut and the villi and the microvilli in an atrophic state, then you're going to be laying out the body for potential for much more serious conditions that are harder to be treating. And so coming back, of course, back to the gut, healing the gut. So then if we're going to be eating for restoration and regeneration, it's a purposeful way of eating for long-term health. You remove all potential allergens and acidifying foods from the diet on a daily basis, and making sure you do that for at least 3 months. You get a healing of the intestinal system. The mucous lining, the bacterial flora, the Peyer's patches can all regenerate. And so this diet, typically it's lower in protein, and this is because typically we eat too much protein as a society. So 40 to 60 grams, or kind of meat the size of your palm, would be about the amount of animal protein the body can process in a day. So the idea is to not be eating more than that generally, but in this diet to drop the protein out to be able to allow the body to do some healing and give the body a bit of a break. It's very alkaline in nature. It's free from food from allergens, so no cow dairy, which can cause congestion, inflammation, and stress on the immune system. And it's also very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which helps to enhance cell metabolism, cellular membrane strength, and getting the tissues better oxygenated and supporting really healthy flora as well. So the details of the diet, if you haven't heard these ones before, so again, purpose of this diet is to remove these primary antigens from the diet, and that allows the mucous membranes and the gut flora to restore and to rebuild. There's a lot of specifics in here. I know that a lot of patients have a really hard time with the idea, but this is not a permanent thing. It's often just a up to 3 month thing. You can get all the details in the Swiss Secret for Optimal Health. It's one of the books that we have here at Biomed, and this one specifically talks about this diet as a restorative and regenerative diet. Things to avoid include meat, dairy, specifically cow, specifically chicken eggs, shellfish, predatory fish because they tend to be higher in mercury, nuts, citrus fruit, histamine-rich foods because we're trying to calm the histamine reaction in the body, refined sugars and processed foods, preservatives, sodas, yeast-containing foods, and white flour products. And so things that are permitted, all vegetables, lots of leafy greens, lots of avocado, seeds, some nuts if somebody's not allergic, lots of oils including olive, coconut, grape seeds, sunflower flax, rice, beans, legumes, organic soy and seaweeds, whole grains, especially ancient grains, sheep and goat dairy, fresh juices, chicken and fish and turkey, lemon juice, mild vinegars, lots of water, and healthy herbs and Himalayan salt. And then, of course, there's many more things within that, but that's kind of the essence of this diet. And so, again, the last thing, kind of the importance, and again, to understand, is restoring gut health is going to decrease allergic tendencies. You want to follow this diet for 6 to 12 weeks, and this is going to allow the regeneration cycle of those body cells in the gut to fully regenerate and kind of rebuild. Exclude those primary antigens, so that's the cow, dairy, the chicken eggs, and the gluten. so that the mucous membranes in the villi and the microvilli can start to rebuild, restore the immune system, so increase IgA to reduce leaky gut. Using pleorebasan is a good point in doing all this to help kind of just increase the immune intestinal system. And then it helps to naturally detoxify, deacidify. I didn't mention this here, but eating lots of veggies with raw veggies or steamed veggies, but with lots of cellulose, is really good food for the gut flora if a patient can handle that type of raw food and with digestion. Okay, so then the last thing I just want to finish off with here is a few different protocols. Again, I'll send this into with an email, and so you'll have all the details with these protocols. So let's just talk through them really quickly. If you were looking for a seasonal allergy protocol, just a really easy symptomatic one. You've got a patient that's coming in, they're complaining about tree pollen and causing a lot of allergic-like symptoms, and all they're really interested in is a natural antihistamine. Then using something like Allergens is going to be your very best bet. They can take it every 15 minutes, or they can take it up to 3 times a day. If that's the case, if you can get some vitamin C also into that mix, so the Allergens plus the vitamin C, that's going to help to reduce the histamine load in the cells and strengthen things, so they'll be less reactive overall. C-Boost is very delicious. It's a new vitamin C combo of food nutrient vitamin C with sodium ascorbate. It mixes beautifully with water and it tastes really good. So that's one that has got great compliance and will work perfectly to help reduce the histamine in the body. If you want to work kind of with allergy symptoms, not just about symptomatic relief, but working through the allergy season and overall trying to improve the reaction in the body or decrease the reaction, then using Allergens or Allergies, you choose one or the other. I guess in some cases you could choose both, but generally you choose one or the other. Again, Allergens is going to work as an antihistamine. Allergies will also do that. It's helping to decrease the histamine load in the body and get the cells, the mast cells, less reactive overall. You want to put a probiotic into their daily routine, and also you want to alkalize. And so alkalizing is really important when we're working on a more chronic allergy-like picture. And so if somebody's got sinusitis and or sinus allergies, the one thing to really remember, again, is that all the mucous membranes in the body are intrinsically connected. And so this often comes back to restoring the gut. It's really important to restore the gut in chronic sinusitis. And it's really interesting because most people who have chronic sinusitis don't actually even realize that they do have it, and it takes years to kind of figure it out, that the slow stuffiness that's built up over the years is actually a problem. And if you go back, often it's triggered by some sort of food that is causing intestinal inflammation. So healing the gut in sinusitis is really, really important. In the meantime, if they need some symptomatic relief, Hydrastis nasal spray is the way to go. A spray up each nostril will really reduce the congestion and inflammation in the nose. Vitamin C is also really great to help boost that immune system and kind of decrease the inflammation and reaction. And then basic tabs, again, as part of overall milieu restoration. The intestinal repair kit or the intestinal kit is also for a chronic sinusitis patient, a good option for that. And of course, the restorative diet. And then we've got 2 more protocols. I'm just going to mention bronchitis. So bronchitis, that's due to allergies or allergic bronchitis. Bronca, which we talked about, it's a lung bronchial dilator and reduces congestion and gets mucus broken up in the lungs. Bronca would be the first and foremost thing to reach for. Vitamin C, alkalizing, and if a client is willing to go the long run, doing some intestinal repair with the intestinal repair kit is going to go a long way for them. And then finally, some skin relief. And so this is, again, with rashes, especially if they're allergic rashes. The principles all kind of go back to the same thing. We're going to restore the gut. We're going to reduce acid-base imbalance. We're going to help with symptomatic relief. But with the skin-like rashes, one of the things that you can use for symptomatic relief is Luvos powder. It is a mineral earth that is from Germany that is great. It's a big porous molecule. If you mix it with water, make a paste, topically apply it to a rash or hives or eczema or fungal infection or rosacea, psoriasis. What it will do is it helps to soak up toxins. It helps to decrease the inflammation response, and it increases blood flow and oxygen to the area, so it helps for improved healing and decrease of reaction. And so typically you apply it, you let it dry, and then you rinse it off with warm water. It can be done many times a day. And if you've got children or you have a practice seeing a lot of kids, this is one of those really great things to have parents keep in their medicine cabinet for anytime rashes or stings or hives show up with their little ones, and then they can just pop that right on, and that will create quick relief and also to decrease the symptoms. Okay, so with all of that said, thank you so much for listening to Reducing Allergic Responses in Your Patients, and I wish everyone a really wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.